Hi guys, my name is Nico. I'm from Germany, and today I'm going to walk through you to the web console of NetLock RMM in version 2.000 with the release version on the 15th November 2024. It's important that this is just a recording of the current version of NetLock, so it might be possible that future versions look a little different. So let me open up the NetLock RMM web console for you now. The first thing you're going to see is the dashboard. On the dashboard, you have some basic statistics where you can see, for example, the authorized and unauthorized device online or offline. You have an overview about events that occurred in the past 24 hours based on the severity or the type. Then what we have is an unread events overview. That means if an event occurred, like a sensor had been triggered or an antivirus detection appeared, you will be able to see it on the dashboard. For example, you can select the time span where you want to filter with, and you can select the severity. For example, if you only want to see critical events, you can just select them there. Right now we have no critical, but we have high events. Then what you can do is you can refresh it. You can mark everything as read or export that information, all the events, to an Excel or HTML or JSON file. Then you can search in the events. For example, what you want to know is, or what we know now, is that the spooler service on a device stopped working. So we are going to search for spooler, and as you can see, we have an information about the event that the spooler service stopped. If you're going to open it up, we see additional details. For example, when did the event occurred? The tenant, which could be the which is represents the customer, then the location, the device, the severity that we configured in the sensor before, then reported by sensor, then the event itself, and the details. If you close that, the event is being marked as read, so you will not be able to see it anymore on the dashboard. You would be able to still see it in the events history or on the device details events. Then what we can see is a user overview. This is just some basic information, so you can always see all the administrators that are currently existing in the web console, and that when they had been active, and their IP addresses, or maybe just also the contact information to reach out to them quickly if they are not on your side. Same with the tenants. This is a customer overview where you can define where you can see the defined tenants. You could also get some more contact information out of them quickly on the dashboard. Talking about tenants, let's just jump straight to the tenants manager. If you are in the tenants manager, you have the possibility of adding new tenants to your system. Tenants is basically just a customer. So if you have more than one customer to manage, you can completely technically separate them in the NetLock console by just adding them. Then if you go into a customer, in this case it will be Digital Hub 1, you can see some basic information and fill that out. And then what you can do is add locations. So if you have different locations like headquarters or support quarters, something like that, you can add each location to it. And under the locations, you can add groups, for example, workstations or server, depending on your environment. Now, if we take a look on our left navigation bar, we can see the tenants. So in this case, we have a tenant, it's marked as a person, and then we have the location or another location and the groups sub to that. Now we will take a look on the device overview. In our case, I'm going to directly jump to authorized devices because I already have agents installed and authorized them. So once you have an agent installed, it will contact the server, and then it will be first on the unauthorized devices, but then it will, after you authorize it, it will be shown on authorized. Um, what we can see now is a basic overview about the name, the tenant, the location, and the connected group if you have connected it to a group. Then the version of the agent, the last contact, when it contacted the system the last time, the IP addresses, it's the internal and external IP address, and of course the operating system and some other information. Now if we click on a device, in our case it will be our demo machine, we can see a lot of more information. Of course, again, we can see the basic agent information and the external IP address, then some more operating system information, then security, if the Windows firewall, for example, is enabled or not, an installed antivirus, in our case it's a server installation, that's why there is no security center, so we cannot display that. And then the last boot of the machine and the time zone. Then we have some basic hardware information about the processor, the RAM available if TPM is enabled, and something which is pretty cool. If we click on history, we can view the history of every synchronization between the server and the agent. It will add the current state of the agent or the device to a history. Then if we scroll down to processor, we have a lot more information about the current processor. That means how many processors are running, the threads, the handles, the speed, and some other information. Same here. Every entry you can see on the web console about devices, you can see you can browse the history to see how the device behaved in the past. Same for RAM. We have a lot more information about the RAM. In this case, it's a virtual machine. That's why it's looking so weird right now. On a normal workstation or a better virtual machine setup, you can see a lot of more information. The same for network. We can see the network adapters running and what they are doing depending on the configuration of the system. And we can also browse the history of them. Then we have more information about the current hard drives that are connected to either connected or in the system in themselves. So what we can see now is we can see the model, we can see the firmware version, the serial number if existing, then the interface, and if it's the type fixed. Fixed, for example, is just a fixed hard drive. Otherwise, you will see like removable, or in this case, CD-ROM. This is a virtual image that is being mounted. Then the file system, and if the and if the drive is ready. What we can also see now is the history again for the drives. So every time the agent connects and with the backend and updating the information, you can view at what time the device had what kind of memory available. Then we can take a look on the antivirus products. As I said, on Windows Server, there's no security center existing. That's why it's empty. On workstations, you will be able to see the installed antivirus solution. What we can also do is we can edit the notes. So if you had like done some support work, or if you have some special information for another employee or administrator that's working with you on the device, you can just leave a note here and save it, and then they can exit it. The same for the history, so they can view it in the history. The next step would be taking a look on applications. This is basically our software inventory, so we can see all installed applications here. In my case, it's a test VM, so there's nothing installed, just VirtualBox guest editions. And of course, you could browse the history again and see all the installed applications in the past. So if you have like a software bug, or you don't know what kind of version of which software was installed before, you can take a look in the history over time. Then the logon information. In my case, there's nothing as a logon for a user, so we cannot see anything here, but if a user would have an application in his logon profile, you could be able to see it. Then the task scheduler. The task scheduler shows all available tasks you defined in the task scheduler. So if you want to have more information, for example, about .NET Framework, just a sample now, you can just search for it and taking a look on the configuration. The same for the history again. You can, of course, take a look in the history. Then going to services, we will be able to see all the information about installed services on the system. In this case, there are around 200 installed, and what we can see here is the display name, of course, the service name, the login type, start type, status, path, and description. In my case, the system is German, that's why you see a German description here. But what is more interesting is that you can execute comments on these. So if you're looking for a spooler, for example, that's just a printer service, we can select it and then we can view the status. If you click on it, you will be prompted for a notification, additional notification, because this is a remote comment, and for security reasons, you will be prompted again. So we confirmed that. Then we can see that we are connected to the remote server. And then if you click on status again, you can see that the service is running. So that's the feedback. What we want to do now is we want to stop the service. So we click on stopping, and as you can see now, the service was running and is now stopped. If you click on status again, we can see that the service is stopped. But we want to let it run, otherwise I cannot print in my VM anytime soon. So I just started the service again. Just some information, the service monitoring is pretty robust. So what we can do now, for example, if for any reason the service fails to execute again, we will see the error message, it will be reported back. In my case, I'm going to deactivate the service now just to simulate it. Then I'm going to stop the service. Now, if we try to start the service again, we can see that it couldn't be started. The problem here is that Windows is not giving any additional details, so that's why we cannot see right now why it couldn't be started. But depending on the error that is connected to the service, you will see it here. Then the last thing in the software inventory is the drivers. So if you, for example, think that drivers outdated or could be outdated, you can check it in here too. Same again with the history, you can take a look on older drivers and search for them if needed. Then we have the task manager, and in the task manager, it's just like the Windows task manager. You can see every process that is running on the machine. In this case, we can see, for example, the name, then the process ID, and then the parent name. So it's a parent process that executed this process. There's, of course, the parent ID, then some CPU information, RAM information, the user that had executed it, when it had been created, of course, the path, command line, which can be pretty interesting in some cases, the handles, threads, and read operations, and some more information for more performance analysis. So what we can now do is we can also terminate processes here. I'm not going to show it to you right now because I don't have a test process open right now, but if you just select it, then click on terminate, it will terminate the process. That's not a good idea with the elsas.exe because it will probably crash the system, so I'm gonna leaving this one. Then there's the antivirus overview. In our case, NetLock default supports the Windows Defender. So what you can do with policies, for example, is completely controlling the Defender remotely and through NetLock. And this includes gathering information about events, like if an virus detection popped up, you will see it in NetLock. You can send it to you through the notifications feature. And you can also see scan jobs that have been completed. You can also define them, but we are going back to that later. So in our case, we can see that anti-malware service is enabled. We can see the version, and then on the bottom, we can right now see that tamper protection is not enabled on the system. Yeah. Going to remote, we will be able to see the remote shell history. This is connected to the remote shell, so every time you use the remote shell and execute a command, you will be able to see the results and the comments from past executions. Going to events, we have a filtered view of the events of the device. That means beside of the dashboard where you can see unread events, you can select the device and then going straight to the events of the device just to have a better overview. There you can filter for the severity again, then the type, and you can search in them. What you can also do, if you didn't saw that already, is refreshing them. Then you can mark them as read and you can export them, for example, as an Excel file, JSON or HTML for better reporting. Then if you just click on one, we can see the details. Yeah. Talking about the remote features, we have the remote shell. If we access it, we need to again authorize ourselves. And then what we can do now is, this is basically a remote shell. Depending on the operating system, for Windows it's the remote PowerShell. We can simply execute scripts and commands. So in our case, just we want to show what kind of content is on the device right now. So we are going to execute it and we can see the output. So what we have here are the basic folder, the default folders of Windows, and a bunch of autorun zip files. What we can also do is we can select templates. So there's a feature in NetLock, a collection feature, where you can add scripts and then just access them quickly. From this case, we want to have more information about the BIOS, so we can just execute it and we will get back the information. The same with the IP addresses. We want to see the IP addresses on the system, so we just get that back. Yeah. That's basically it for the remote shell. It's just a remote shell, but it's pretty fun to work with, so you can work in background without interrupting your users. The next very cool remote feature is the file browser. So if you click on it, then login, we can see every file and folder of the remote machine. So we have some details, what kind of file is this? Is this a zip file? Is this a system file? The size, and we can also perform actions here. For example, there's a test folder. I just want to delete it, so I right click it, click on delete, and then it's deleted. It also shows you the output of the deleted files that were in there. Now what I want to do, I want to create it again, because yeah, we need the test folder. So as we can see, we just created it and now we are in there. The next step would be I want to upload a file. So I'm going again into the test folder. Then I want to, yeah, I don't want to upload one. I will upload one, but first of all, I'm going to create a new file. In our case, you just want to create a simple text file. This could be anything, maybe like a PowerShell script. And we have just fill in the content, confirm it, and then we can see the file. What I want to do now is I want to upload a file. So I click on upload file, and then I just select one of the Autoruns files here, and it will be uploaded. That's it. Now we can also download the file if you want to. Yeah, same, you can move the file or we can rename the file depending on our actions. Yeah, that's it for the file browser. Now there's just the last very cool feature. If you want to remote control devices, just like with TeamViewer, you can perform that with NetLock too. So what we're going to do is we click on remote control, then we authorize ourselves, and then we can see the screen. It is important that the user is logged in, otherwise you won't be able to see the screen right now, but we need to make sure that the current remote control feature is in beta, so that might change in the future. What we can do is we can select the user. In this case, it's administrator. It's the only existing user on this machine right now. Then we can select the screens. In our case, it's just the VM screen. And we can select the refresh rate, how fast the screen should refresh, depending on your network configuration. Now what we can do is we can control the machine. For example, we want to open up the notepad and then we type in some tests. Just like with every yeah, what can I say? Like with every remote control software you have on the market, but built in, and it's maybe not required for you to have any additional ones. Then we can close it, we save it. Could we save it just on desktop? Calling it test, then close it. Then if we right click it, we can just delete it, and then we can end the remote maintenance. Let's talk about policies. If you're going to policies, you'll see the policy overview. Just before, what is a policy? A policy defines what kind of features should be enabled or settings should be forced on the device. For example, we have created this main policy in here. If we are entering it, we can see a bunch of features we can configure. In the first place, you see the antivirus configuration. That means for the defender, we can, for example, disable or enable the security showing the antivirus protection in a security center. That means, just as a quick hint, we can, you know this, you know the security center entry of your antivirus solution. For example, with NetLock, you could hide that if you just untick the box. The same with the security center tray icon. Then you can configure a bunch of other options. I don't think that I need to explain them in detail. You can surely test them out yourself. Then what you can do is we can remote force, or better to say force of the policies, use the policy to force the exclusions of the Windows Defender. For example, if you want to add an exclusion for a process because you have an application that has been detected by the Defender, or you are scared that it could happen that it will be detected, or if you just want to improve the performance, you could just define the process path here. So in this case, like c test.exe, then the description, and then adding it. The same is you can delete them and edit them. One information with this Defender control, if there are any other exclusions existing on the system that are not handled through NetLock, they will be deleted, and the exclusion set in NetLock will be forced. Talking about scan jobs, with the scan jobs feature, you have the possibility of defining scan jobs just for the Defender. So if we added this currently existing scan job as an example, we can see you can check to either enable or disable it. So for example, if you just want to disable it for a certain time or enable it for a certain time, you can just do that. Then you can define the name. In our case, it's called quick scan. That just stands for the same term of the Defender itself. Then you have the time scheduler, where you can select exactly on what kind of time period the scan job should be executed. For example, if you want to execute it on the following days, you can just select it and then define, for example, the hours. In our case, we want to execute it every 5 hours on Tuesday and Thursday. Then you can select the scan mode. In in this case it's currently selected is quick scan. Quick scan just stands for the scan mode that's defined in the Defender itself. The same stands for full scan. If you select it, it will perform a full scan of the system, defined like the Defender will do it. Then you can select the maximum CPU utilization. And so that means you don't want the scan job to consume more than this kind of percent of CPU resources to prevent any performance bottlenecks. Then you can select if you want to allow it scanning in battery mode. That's good for notebooks, laptops. Then if you want to scan also connected network drives and removable media. Then for this case, it should be like USB drives or USB hard drives. And if you want to check for new signature updates before you start the scan. What you can also do is you can define a custom scan. If you select it, you can go to directories and then you can add your directory that you want to scan. Of course, you can still add more directories than once. And yeah, that's it for the scan job feature. Just a quick reminder, every scan job report and if a virus has been found will be displayed to you in the web console and being sent to you to the notifications feature if enabled. Now when we scroll up again, we can see the tab Sensors. If you click on Sensors, on this overview you can select the sensors that should be enabled for this policy. So that means with the sensor feature that we are going to take a look later on, you can exactly define what kind of sensors should be forced and enabled on the system. Of course, if you can just untick it, and then if you save it, it will be refreshed on the machines that the policy is assigned. The same for jobs feature. The jobs feature will also go back later on, later to it. You can also enable and disable jobs you want to execute on the system. That's it for the policies right now. Now you maybe wonder how you can apply those policies to the devices. That's pretty easy. You just go to automations and there you can add automations. For example, we have our main policy automation right now. What happens here is you can define the category for the automation. In our case, currently just policies available. Then you can select the condition. In our case, it's if tenant. And then you can make it equal to, for example, our tenant digital hub BON. And then you can select the action. In our case, it's policy and then the main policy. That means that if the tenant is called digital hub BON, the main policy will be assigned to it. What you can also do is you can select other kind of categories like device name, location, group, internal and external IP address, and domain. They are rated. So that means, for example, if we have two automations running, one is for the tenant and one is, for example, for the device name. And if the device name matches, the tenant tenant automation will be overridden with the device name automation. That means, depending on your scenario, you can add many more automations to better make sure that you match the environment the device is currently in, regarding your sensors and jobs, for example. Now let's talk about the collections feature. In our case, we're going to take a look on scripts first. What is scripts? Scripts is just a script collection where you can add your favorite scripts to a collection so you can quickly access them either in the sensors or in the remote feature as shown previously, like with the remote shell. And every time you edit the script here, and if the script is assigned, for example, in a job or in a sensor, it will be automatically updated for the device. So this is just like a global scripts collection where you can access your favorite scripts and edit them. Now we can take a look on jobs. Jobs is depending on the operating system. For Windows, it would be scheduled tasks. You can define specific jobs to be executed on a certain time. This can be, for example, gathering system boot information. You can get BIOS information out of it or IP addresses. Basically anything that you want to do and can accomplish with PowerShell. So in this case, if we edit the current job, we can see the name, we can see the description. Then you can schedule it for the time that how often you want it to be executed. In our case, currently it's selected every X minutes, and in this case it's 5 minutes. But you can of course choose other options. And then the platform, currently it's Windows. Then there's the type is PowerShell, and the script is currently IP addresses that is connected with it. That's the script from the script collection. So if you want to add a script there, you need to add it in the script collection, and then you can select it here. As I already said, the good thing is that once you edit the script in the scripts collection, it will be automatically applied to the jobs, so the devices always have the latest script running. The next step is the sensors feature. With the sensors feature, you can monitor and detect performance bottlenecks, software bugs and failures, service failures, and so more on. For example, you can monitor the drive usage of a system, then you can monitor and crawl the Windows event log, for example with regex, so you can detect specific strings in the Windows event log and connect it with a specific event, for example. You can monitor the RAM usage, the CPU usage. You can execute custom PowerShell sensors so that you, for example, write a script that's looking for a specific expected error in a log file, for example. You can do that with the PowerShell sensor. Then you can also monitor services, and you can also ping servers to, for example, devices to detect if they are offline or still running. And if that's the case, you can define actions for it. Let's just straight start with the drive space used feature. Let's jump straight to the drive space used sensor. In this case, we can see again the basic information, the time schedule, but then what we have is a subcategory. It's called drive right now, and then the condition. In our case, we want that the sensor will be triggered if more than X% of the drive's capacity is occupied. This can also be selected for and then if you have more than X gigabyte occupied or less than X gigabyte free, and the same for less than X% free, depending on what kind of thing you want to achieve. So if you're going to rule here, we can now add the drive letters we want to monitor. Basically, it's simple. If you want to monitor all drives on the system, you can just delete the letter, leave it empty, and it will monitor all existing drives. For additional tips, you always have those information icons on the side. Then what we can do is we can select that only drives with a certain amount of gigabytes or more will be checked. For example, you maybe don't want to check USB drive, so you can define, for example, 50 gigabytes. Oh, that's my boss code. You can, for example, select 50 gigabytes so that you don't scan any kind of smaller removable drives. Then what you can do is you can select a percentage. In our case, we want to trigger the sensor if more than 10% is occupied. This is because of our test environment. You can, of course, rise it up to like 80%, depending on your conditions. Then you can also monitor network drives and removable disks. That really depends on what you want to achieve. Then there's the notification after threshold values exceeded. That means maybe it's depending on the sensor you're going to execute. It happens that an error occurs once, but not more than one time. So, for example, if an error just occurs once and you know that it recovers itself anyway, you don't want it to be you don't want it to trigger the sensor. But for example, if the sensor is being triggered 5 times in a row, you want the notification to be sent. So with this configuration, the sensor will only send you a notification if the sensor has been triggered 5 times in a row. Or if you just leave it on 0, it will report every time. Then you can define an action. An action is always a script execution. On Windows, it's PowerShell. So we have our access to the script collection here again. And then, for example, if we know there's maybe a software that is producing a lot of log files and you cannot prevent that for any reason, just as an example, you could, for example, add a PowerShell script to clear those log file directories, and every time you detect that the drive is getting full again, you can just execute it and clean the drive. Just an example. Also with the action, you can define a threshold. So only if, for example, the sensor triggered 5 times in a row, the action will be executed. And you can automatically reset it. Otherwise, if you don't automatically reset it, it will just count every time the sensor is triggered, it will count it up. But for example, if the sensor is triggered and then it's not triggered, it will reset again to its counter to 0. So it will start counting again. Then you have the notifications. On the notifications, you can select what kind of notifications that should be sent with the sensor. Going to the notifications feature later, you can of course define a lot of more stuff like the severity, but this is just to cover if you want to send a notification through a certain channel. The next sensor we are going to take a look on is the Windows Event Log sensor. In this case, we can see that we can select the event log to monitor. This can be application, security, setup, or system. What you can also do is to define a custom event log. Then we can fill in the event ID. I mean, as you know what an Windows event log is, the event ID stands for the event that has been created. It's the event type that has created. What you can also do now is you could either use complex regex patterns. In this case, that's a pattern to find mail addresses in that event log. So that does make sense in a service state changed event. But just for an example, if for any reason there would be a mail address in the text or details of this event log, you would be able to detect it with it. You can either just leave the expected result empty. If you leave it empty, then the sensor will trigger anyway as soon as it's find this event. Otherwise, you could provide any kind of text like, for example, error. So if there's the word error in it, it will trigger, or you can use a complex regex pattern. And then what you can do is, of course, select how frequently should the notification be sent after X hits in a row, and of course defining an action again like with the other sensors. That's it for the event log sensor. The next sensor is the RAM utilization sensor. If you're going to open it, we can simply select at what kind of percentage the sensor will trigger. That means, for example, if my computer now has a RAM usage or the RAM is used for over 90%, it will trigger the sensor. Otherwise, you can of course lower it depending on your goal, but the sensor really helps you to find bottlenecks and detect if a server is running low on memory. Well, with the RAM sensor, you can go even more into detail. What you can do is you click on subcategory, then RAM, and then you can select process RAM utilization in percentage or in megabytes. So for example, if we select percentage and then we provide an exe name, in this case it's the MySQL server, if then the MySQL server consumes more than, for example, 75% of the system's available working memory, the sensor will be triggered. The same you can do with megabytes. So if the process consumes, for example, more than 1 gigabyte of working memory, the sensor will be triggered too. This really helps to monitor certain processes where you know that they are consuming a lot of memory or can consume a lot of memory to detect if there could be any bottlenecks too. The next sensor is the processor utilization sensor. In this case, it's basically the same like with the system memory sensor. You can define the limit. In this case, it would be 80%. And if this limit has been exceeded, the sensor will trigger. But the same like with the system memory sensor, it's not just that. You can also select a subcategory, and then you can also choose to monitor the CPU utilization of a certain process. So for this example, again, if you would fill in mysql.exe, we would be able to monitor the CPU usage of the total available CPU power just from that process. And if that process exceeds the limit, the sensor will trigger too. The PowerShell sensor, however, you can add under root and then script the script you want to execute. That will be like your sensor script. In our case, it's we want to output IP addresses, and then you can define an expected result. This can be regex again, like a regex pattern, or just a simple word, text, whatever. And in this case, the sensor will trigger if the output IP address would be localhost. But yeah, I mean, that's all will obviously trigger. That's just for demo purposes. But you could, for example, core log files that are not supported with the default native sensors from NetLock, and just with PowerShell. And if you find a certain output there, the sensor will trigger. And now we come to the service sensor. Yeah, it's just like you imagine in service monitoring. What you can do here is you can select a service name. In this case, it would be Spooler. Spooler is the printing service under Windows. And then what you can check is if the status is running. If that is the case, it will trigger an action. In this case, it's for demo purposes. We selected running because we want to trigger the sensor. In your case, what you probably want to do is to select stop. So in case that the service is stopped, the sensor will trigger, and then you can, of course, send you a notification. Or what you can do, when on the actions, you can try to automatically start the service or to restart it if it's currently stopped. And you can also perform a script execution, in this case with PowerShell scripts again. So if you know that there's a certain problem with a service that is occurring once in a while, you could counter that with an automated PowerShell script execution with the sensor. Just a little cut right now. In the service sensor, if the action fails for any reason, you will be notified with the error message, just as an addition. The last sensor type in NetLock you can currently define is the ping sensor. If you're going to open it up, we can see under the rule the IP address or host name, depending on what you want to check. Then what you can provide is a timeout. That depends really on your server configuration, how long you want to give it until it will time out. Then on what condition you want to let the sensor trigger. If, for example, the ping has failed, that means maybe you are trying to monitor a printer service or a printer server, or maybe a database server with it, you would immediately get a message and a notification, depending on the configuration of your notifications. What you also can do is to set it to successful. This could be an example if you want to make sure and monitor that certain devices are not open available in the internet. For example, you have a firewall in front of them, but sometimes it could happen that for any reason you forget to enable a rule again after you did some maintenance work. You would be notified at least if the device is pingable. Of course, that doesn't replace a port scan, but that's a feature that will come to NetLock 2. So stay tuned for that. And then depending on the result, you can of course execute an action again. That's it for the sensors. We can just jump straight to the next feature. The next big feature is the files feature. So why is it a big feature? Basically, that's the file server integrated into the NetLock backend. So what you can achieve with it, for example, if you access a device through the remote file browser and download or upload a file, you can see the history in here. In this case, like we have the demo VM, then we can go to download it and we can see all the files we have downloaded from the system. The same for upload, we can see all the files we have downloaded from this device. And we can also access them again. So we right click them, then we can download them, for example. Then what we can do, if you go back, we can create a new folder. We call it test right now. Then we enter it. And then we can upload our own files. This, for example, could be tools or scripts you want to either share with your customers or with your on-site employees. So maybe an administrator has his favorite tool and he always wants to keep it with him. You could centrally host it through NetLock and access it securely on the customer side. Example, if we select upload file, we call it upload out once again. And then we can just like right click it, then copy the download link. Or yeah, you should of course use the download link and not log in the web interface at your customer's location. Then what you also can do is of course you can rename, delete the file, download it then as we said. And what we also have is an access control. So you can define if the file should be accessible private. Private means that you can only download the file if a GUID and a password is provided. To refresh the password, you can simply set it to public and then private again. You could use scripts for, like, for example, the PowerShell or the remote shell to directly integrate those downloads then in your scripts and perform actions with them. What is also possible, and this will be something for the future, that the NetLock agent itself, it will be able to always download and access those files, depending on the background comment. Yeah, that's it for the files feature. It's a powerful file server. Now let's talk about the events overview. Of course, you already saw something similar on the dashboard and in the device details, but this is more a general overview of all events that had been logged on your customer's environments. So of course you can select time span to filter, then you can refresh, of course mark them as read, and you can export them. I'm going to export them now as HTML just to show it to you because I didn't do that previously. And if you're going to open it, we have an HTML file with all the events. So maybe you can use that to better browse and search for events or doing some kind of reporting and auditing stuff. But just to be said, there will be a reporting feature coming in the future too. Now what we're going to do is we can also show already read events. We can open the event and then of course we can take a look in it. For example, in this kind of event, we have a sensor and the sensor said that the spooler service stopped. We can see the status that it has been stopped and then also the action that had been defined and it was executed successfully. We can also see the history of the PowerShell script we executed. In this case, we wanted to see the last boot up time. It's just an example, so you might want to use another PowerShell execution here. Let's click on users now. If you click on users, we will get a users overview. Each user represents a NetLock account in the web console. That means each user that has an account can log into the web console. This could be, for example, be another administrator that is working together with you on the customer environments remotely and want to manage stuff throughout NetLock. So if you're going to edit our example user right now, that is admin, and that is the user that we are currently logged in with, you can, for example, could change the username, you could reset the passwords, fill in more contact details, depending on how big your team is. That could be really helpful. Then you can select the role. Currently, the only available role is administrator. Just a quick hint, there will be more rules, for example, a customer that is then able to access specific kind of content and statistics in the future. Then there's a two-factor authentication. If you enable it and then relog in, the user will be prompted to set up two-factor authentication. This could be used with Google Authenticator or Authy or any other of your favorite two-factor authentication tool. Then what you can do is we go to permissions. Under permissions, we can see assigned tenants. Assigned tenants means that the tenants that are assigned here will be visible for our user. For example, we currently have all two existing tenants enabled. But if we uncheck the cybersecurity one, take a look here, and we're going to save it. As I said, take a look here and refresh the page. Then the tenant will be gone. Of course, this is just for demo purposes, so we want to see it. So we check it again, click on save, refresh the page again, and then we can see the tenant again. You can also break that down to different features. For example, if you want to hide the tenant management, you could just completely disable it, and then you wouldn't be able to navigate to the managed tenants anymore. You can also disable features like adding tenants, manage tenants, edit tenants, and delete tenants. Same for locations and groups. Then what you can also do is you can break down the features for the authorized devices. That means the authorized device overview was the one where we could see more device details. So for example, you can disallow an administrator to deauthorize devices, move them, take a look on the general tab, software tab, task manager, or the events, or what could be more interesting maybe is to restrict the access to remote shell and the file browser, but still let the administrator be able to remote control the machine and assist the user that is logged in. This could be useful for the classic remote support, but without giving every administrator in your company the possibility of executing comments in the background. Same for unauthorized devices. You can enable it and choose if an administrator should be able to authorize the device or not. Same with the dashboard, you can enable or disable it. Then the automations, the policies too. Then the collections. I think that's self-explanatory. And then events user management, that's of course more important. So you could restrict the user of that he is not able to add users or edit them, manage them. So this is a feature that should only be reserved for the main administrator team and not for any single additional administrator that's working in a company with you. I think you get the point. Then under settings, you have the possibility to allow to edit the notifications, like for example the mail notifications, the Teams notifications, Telegram, and Antivirus site, then also to access the system settings and system logs. That's it with the permissions feature. Let me just save that and let's jump straight to the next feature. Let's talk about the next big feature. If you're, for example, going to settings now, then notifications, we are the notifications feature. That means every time an event is being protocoled, depending on the configuration for the sensors, the antivirus management, you will be able to send this notification to a certain mail address, Microsoft Teams channel, Telegram account, or channel, and Antivirus topic. For example, if you want to send a mail to a user, a notification, we could go to SMTP settings. Then you need to edit them, set the server up, then just test it. If it's working, you will see they're successful and the test mail will arrive. Then you can define the recipients. In this case, I have my own mail address added here, and if you click on edit, we are able to see the description, but then what we can do is we can select the severity. So depending on the event that has been protocols, we only want to, for example, receive events that are critical or high, depending on your environment. So I don't want to get interrupted in my sleep, for example, or while being outside of the office, if there's just like a low event that could be taken care later on. So I just want to get them when they are critical. Then what you also can do is you can select the tenants for which the notification should be sent or not. So example, if I'm going to assign the digital hub tenant, only if the event that is coming in, its severity is critical, and the tenant is a digital hub tenant or the customer, it will send me a notification. The same applies for Microsoft Teams, where you can add connectors. Then Telegram, as I said, you can add the bot, then the bot token and chat ID. Chat ID can be a Telegram channel or chat directly with your account. And the Antivirus.sh topic. So what you can do here is also define an access token for private topics and topic URL. That's it for the notifications feature. It's pretty powerful and always let you stay up to date with the happenings in your environment. The next feature is the system logs feature. As you can see, this is pretty empty right now. This is just for development purposes, and for those of you who are open source developers, this will be more advanced in the future. For example, we are going to add auditing here, that if an administrator, for example, does something on the device, you will be able to see it here as it's been logged. So let's just jump straight to the system feature. The system feature is an overview about the current system and how it behaves. For example, you can see that the web console is currently connected to the MySQL server, and you can see a little more information about the MySQL server, as well as, for example, active queries that are currently running. Then we can see the CPU utilization and working memory utilization and the space used of the web console. That's the server where the web console is running on. In my case, it's my development computer right now. Then what you can see is the NetLock RMM server backends. If you don't know it already, just a quick summary, you can take a look on the documentation under server concepts and roles. You can split the server backends in different kind of roles. So for example, separating the communication with the agents and the update server or the file server or the remote server even. So what you also could do if you're using Kubernetes and firing up a lot of containers, you will be able to see the containers here. They will be listed. For example, this is a server backend. Represents a container right now that is currently not running, which is why we can see the last heartbeat is a little while ago with a red warning. What you can also take a look on is the app settings of that desired NetLock remote server, NetLock backend server. Then we can see this is the server backend that is currently running in my development environment. It is currently up and running, and we can see its details about the CPU utilization too, the RAM utilization, and the disk space used. As we can see, this is pretty similar to the web console. It's just because it's the same machine. Then you can see if the NetLock web console is connected with the NetLock RMM file server wall and the remote server wall. These need to be set up and connected, otherwise you won't be able to use a lot of features. But that's more for the installation tutorial, so take a look on them if you want to go more into detail with that. So if we refresh the page now, we will get a warning message. The warning message appears because one of our server backends is currently not available. And it will trigger as long until you either remove the server completely or you got it up and running. That is just to warn you as an administrator. So I'm going to dismiss that. That's it for the walkthrough. I hope I gave you some insights into NetLock RMM, and I'm sure that you will be having a lot of fun exploring all the other features and possibilities. If you need any help, feel free to join our community Discord or contact us through our members portal. With that said, have a good day